GST in Australia Overview, Timelines, Filling. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Overview of GST. Australia's Goods and Services Tax, GST, is a value-added tax, VAT, that was introduced on July 1, 2000, to replace a range of existing taxes such as wholesale sales tax, financial institutions duty, and stamp duty on some transactions. The GST is a broad-based tax of 10% that applies to most goods and services consumed or used in Australia. The GST is administered by the Australian Taxation Office, ATO, which is responsible for collecting and remitting the tax to the federal government. Registered businesses that exceed a certain turnover threshold must charge and remit GST on their sales and purchases. The GST is also applied to imported goods and services, but there are special rules that apply in these cases. Australia GST rates. The GST rate in Australia is 10%, which means that the tax is calculated at a rate of 10% on the price of the goods or services that are subject to GST. Exemption from GST. However, there are some goods and services that are exempt from the GST, such as basic food, some medical services, and exports. There are also some goods and services that are subject to a reduced rate of GST, such as 1. Basic foods such as bread, bread rolls, cooking ingredients, milk, cream, cheese, spices, and sauces. 2. Some education courses. 3. Medical, health, and care services such as services from a medical practitioner or pathologist and hospital treatment. 4. Some menstrual products. 5. Some medical aids and appliances. 6. Some medicine such as aspirin and paracetamol. 7. Some childcare services, religious activities, and charitable activities. 8. Exported goods. When you need to register for GST. As a business owner, you must register for GST if you have fulfilled one of the following conditions within 21 days after your GST turnover exceeding the stated threshold. 1. You have hit a GST turnover of $75,000 or more. Or if your non-profit organization has a GST turnover of $150,000 and more. 2. You provide taxi, limousine, ride sourcing services such as Uber, GoCatch, Didi, etc. This applies to both driver owners and also those that lease or rent a car. 3. If you want to claim the fuel tax credit for your business. For non-resident business, a special rule may apply to you. Otherwise, the GST registration is optional if you didn't fulfill any of the conditions mentioned above.
Australia GST filling timelines. Here's a timeline for GST filling in Australia. 1. Quarterly GST filling. If you are registered for GST and have a turnover of less than 20 million Australian dollars, you can choose to lodge your business activity statement, BAS, and pay any GST owed quarterly. The due dates for quarterly BAS lodgement and payment are middle. 28th October, for July, August, and September, middle. 28th February, for October, November, and December, middle. 28th April, for January, February, and March, middle. 28th July, for April, May, and June. 2. Monthly GST filling. If your GST turnover is 20 million Australian dollars or more, you must lodge your BAS and pay any owed monthly taxes. The due date for monthly BAS lodgement and payment is the 21st day of the month following the end of the tax period. It's important to note that if the due date falls on a weekend or public holiday, you have until the next business day to lodge and pay. You can also apply for an extension of time to lodge and pay your BAS if you have a valid reason, such as illness or natural disasters. It's recommended to keep track of your GST obligations and due dates to avoid any late payment penalties or interest charges.
Australia. Interest and penalties of GST in Australia. There are interest and penalties that can be applied for late GST lodgement or payment, or for other GST-related compliance breaches. Here's an overview of the key interest and penalties for GST. 1. General Interest Charge, GIC, The JIC is a daily interest charge that applies to any unpaid GST amounts, as well as any penalties and interest charges. The JIC rate is reviewed quarterly and is based on the Reserve Bank of Australia's cash rate target. As of September 2021, the JIC rate is 7.96% per annum. 2. Failure to lodge, FTL, penalty. If you don't lodge your BOS or GST return on time, you may be charged an FTL penalty. The penalty is calculated at the rate of 1 penalty unit for each period of 28 days, or part thereof, that the BOS or GST return is overdue, up to a maximum of 5 penalty units. The current penalty unit amount is 222 Australian dollars, so the maximum FTL penalty is at 1,110. 3. Failure to pay, FTP, penalty. If you don't pay your GST on time, you may be charged an FTP penalty. The penalty is calculated at the rate of 1% of the unpaid amount for each month, or part thereof, that the GST remains unpaid, up to a maximum of 10% of the unpaid amount. 4. Administrative penalties. There are various administrative penalties that can be applied making false or misleading statements, or failing to provide information or documents when requested by the auto. The amount of the penalty can vary depending on the severity of the breach, but it can be up to 11,100 Australian dollars for individuals and up to 55,500 Australian dollars for companies. It's important to note that the auto has the discretion to remit or reduce penalties and interest charges in certain circumstances, such as where the breach was due to factors beyond your control or where you have a good compliance history.
You can contact for bookkeeping and tax services at website www.eliteproaccounting.com, email info@eliteproaccounting.com. You can contact for